Hello and welcome to another edition of Cheers to Careers. I believe this is number 9. Today I'm honored to have Brian Hanni actually in studio. This doesn't happen very often because of COVID, but Brian was on campus, just got done wrapping up the weekly press conference for KU football. So Brian, welcome to Cheers to Careers.
Thank you. 9th in the batting order. So is my batting average down around the Mendoza line? I'm like the 204 hitter.
It's been a solid lineup. I mean, you'd be amazed. I mean, all our hitters have been over 350. So
hey, Haley Harrison and Jesse Newell, those are perennial all-stars. So just to be in the top 9, I'll take it. Thank you very much.
I know I'm not very good at math, but if my math is correct, 20 years ago you were a college senior here at KU. Is that correct?
Yeah, coming up on it. That's right. You did your math correct. I hate admitting that, but if you're watching this, you can see the gray hair, and it confirms that, yeah, I was a class of 02 graduate, just like Travis Goff, our new head Hawk.
Right.
And proud of that we were in the same graduating class from the School of Journalism here. But yeah, it's crazy to think it's been that long.
And I know it's been a busy 20 years, and I think one of the great things about you is you knew what you wanted to do professionally. I mean, back in 2002, and you kind of took those steps to get to the point of being the voice of the Jayhawks. I mean, can you talk a little bit about, kind of that track and how you got to where you are now?
Yeah. Tell you what, I've been so blessed with amazing relationships that have come into my life at the right time to catapult me to where I am today. People that invested time in me and saw something in me that they believed in. And that goes back to my days at Topeka West High School, also the alma mater of Bob Davis, by the way. We've had the play-by-play chair at Kansas now for 38 years, Topeka West has. But I had a guy named Corey Wilson that saw the interest and the spark within me to do something in play-by-play, and they'd never done play-by-play on TV before. And so he was able to jerry-rig this cafeteria cart that he'd haul the gear up the hill to the basketball arena to do the games, and did that for the first time ever to give me an opportunity because he saw ambition within me and expanded his program, to meet the needs and the ambition of a kid within it. And now for 24 years, they've done it ever since because of Corey Wilson. But I came to Kansas, and how many guys get to study under the guy that literally authored the book, The Art of Sportscasting, Tom Hedrick, talking about the original voice of the Kansas City Chiefs, voice of the Jayhawks, voice of the Nebraska Cornhuskers, voice of the Cincinnati Reds. And he was, later in his KU professorship, when I caught him, he went on to teach at Baker after that. But the guy that trained Kevin Harlan, I had a chance to learn under as well. And it's kind of a funny story. I got the first A in his class since Kevin Harlan. But for those of you watching at home, it's all about timing. I met Tom the semester he was falling in love, and like a cartoon that sees hearts around his head, he met Sweet Lee, and he and Lee have been married ever since. And so my first day, to just give you like a timestamp, my first day in Tom Hedrick's class, which was down at the Dole Center, he was getting set to take Lee on a first date, and they were seeing the movie There's Something About Mary.
Oh, nice.
Does that give you like a pop culture reference of how old I am? So when I famously got an A-, thanks to knocking it out of the park, according to Tom, on my final, which was an in-person interview, dressed to the nines, demo tape. He hits you with the hardball questions. He bumped me from a B to an A-, and shockwaves were heard throughout J school history. Wait a minute, he gave out an A? And so many guys who are friends to this day said, you only got an A because he was in love. But we like to laugh about that. But yeah, Tom Hedrick was a huge mentor. And then Ryan Lefevre, I'll never forget. I was an intern at KMBZ in Kansas City when they had just gotten the Royals rights with Ryan doing the games with Denny Matthews. And Ryan invites me out to his home in Lake Winnebago, Missouri, spends 2 hours with me some Sunday afternoon during the off season, listening to my demo tape, hanging out, offered me advice. And he said, I'm doing this for you because somebody did it for me 20 years ago and promised that he would do it for me so long as I paid it forward to the next guy. And he challenged me to do the same. So 20 years later, here I am trying to do that. But Mitch Holtis, Kevin Harlan. Kevin Harlan's a big reason I got this job. It was very fortuitous that when I was at Texas Tech and we made an NCAA tournament for the first time in 9 years, the regional we got sent to was in Raleigh, North Carolina, and he was out there calling the game for CBS or True TV or whoever it was in the first round alongside Reggie Miller. And we had an amazing conversation. And he said, I've had a lot of guys hit me up to endorse them for that job, but you're the guy I'm going to back because I believe in the ambassador you'll be in addition to what you can do on the air. And that meant the world to me. When the gold standard in sportscasting tells you he's going to have your back and send an email on your behalf, oh my gosh, it was a pinch me moment. Is this really happening? So I would tell you first and foremost, yes, a lot of hard work, a lot of hustle, a lot of knowing how to promote yourself and market yourself goes into it. But above all else, I've been uniquely blessed with amazing relationships with people in the industry that offered me the coaching I needed, some critiques I needed at times when that was valuable. But more than anything, they instilled confidence in me. And that's happened at every walk of my career.
I know you're talking about the work that it takes, and I was a sports writer at the Lawrence World from '94 to 2002, and I remember seeing you when I covered KU baseball. I'm not sure if it was for a class, but you would be, I think you're outside the press box, your back was to the press box. I don't know if you were recording yourself, doing play-by-play, taking notes.
Yeah.
Do you remember what was going on there? Was that for a class, or were you just trying to get in that routine?
Sometimes it was for a class, sometimes it was just to get the reps in.
Yeah.
But Tom Hedrick always wanted us to get as many reps as possible. He would tell us, I remember my freshman year at Oliver Hall, back when that was a dorm, that even if we couldn't get to a game in a given weekend, to sit outside and call a game into your cassette tape. Yes, we used cassette decks back then. Of Monday Night Football. Turn on Monday Night Football and just call the action. He said pick up a Sports Illustrated and read a Sports Illustrated article out loud as if you were reading on air. Enunciate, bite off the words, as Tom would say. Come from here, stick out your chest, and project. And those articles aren't written to be read in broadcast form, but the point was these were exercises he taught us how to do. And so, yeah, it was not uncommon to see me at Memorial Stadium or Hoagland Ballpark or whatever, sitting there broadcasting to an audience of one, and whether I turned that tape into Tom or just did it for my own benefit, that was something we often did. And I'll tell you what, when I was at Texas Tech for 4 years and I was doing basketball and baseball, I wasn't getting to do football every week outside of Texas area high school stuff. And so one weekend I drove to TCU, and at the age of 35 years old, I'm sitting in the top of the stands doing the same thing you saw me doing at 19, calling the game to myself just to get more demo tape material, and sometimes that's what you got to do.
And being a voice of the Jayhawks and just in broadcasting in general, you have a chance to really travel the country and all over. I know you just had a recent trip out to Springfield, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And I thought I saw some photos of you and Paul Pierce hanging out, Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
How was that?
No doubt. I was blessed. The best part of what we get to do outside of the people, the best part is these unique experiences going around the country, around the world in some cases. My second year as voice of the Jayhawks, we got to take the Italian exhibition tour.
Oh, that's right.
And there I am. I have a photo on my wall to this day of me and Devontae Graham in the Coliseum taking a selfie together. And that's just amazing memories I'll always cherish. But Springfield was great. Went up there for Paul's enshrinement and also to promote my children's book that we'll probably talk about in a second, Game Maker, because that's, of course, where the game was invented 130 years ago. How about that? Coming up in December, it'll be 130 years exactly. But Paul Pierce was there. The Naismith family was nice enough to let me have access to their seats, which meant I was on the main floor. So I met Charles Barkley and Paul Pierce, and at one point I was 6 feet away from Michael Jordan. And as a 1990s era kid growing up, that's the ultimate. And I've never in my career been the fanboy type that wants to go up and take selfies or get autographs or whatever. But I was like, oh my gosh, is there some way I could possibly do an over the shoulder with MJ, because he's the ultimate. But that was a blast. And I would tell you that at this stage in my career, at 41 years of age, when you've been to every Big 12 school 20 times by now, my favorite part of every season is when the schedule card comes out and you see who those non-conference matchups are. Because I literally have a chart on my wall at home. I'm trying to go to every college campus and see a game, football and basketball, in every stadium there is. And so at the time of taping this week, we're getting set to go to Duke. And I've toured Cameron Indoor on a non-game day for basketball, and we'll do it again this weekend. But I've never called the game at either. So this is one I can cross off the list. David Lawrence, my color analyst for KU football, he and I always love to walk the campuses together and just take it all in. And I think that's something you have to do. We can get sometimes so tunnel visioned on just the task at hand that we don't take time to truly stop and smell the roses on campus and take in the sights and sounds and eat at the watering hole that's the famous spot there, just like we have our favorite places here in Lawrence. And those are the things we do. And I'll tell you this much, when it comes to travel with our broadcast crew, we instituted a rule my first year as voice of the Jayhawks, and we did this in football season because you never know, especially in football, at the time we were at in our program, how the next day was going to go. We said, listen, we can't predict the future, we can't control the outcome on Saturday, but we can control the outcome of Friday night. And so every road trip, we as a crew were going to go out and do something together to make a memory to where, win or lose, it's going to be a successful trip because we grew closer as a crew. We went out and experienced something. And I'm not talking about going out and getting crazy. I'm just, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Find the restaurant, find the sight, the sound, or whatever it is you need to see. Probably my favorite to date was we were in TCU, and we went to see a Dallas Mavericks game when Frank Mason was playing Jeff Withey. And we got to see those guys, and we lucked into some free tickets, and we were out making a memory the night before a game, you know. And that's just become our tradition, because I think to be great on the air and to be a fine-tuned, well-oiled machine as broadcast partners, you got to have a great relationship off the air. And so that's something we do every road trip, no matter where we go.
So do you know the exact number? How many college stadiums have you been to?
Yeah, I could tell you all the pro stadiums.
Oh, okay.
The college stadiums, to add up the non-majors, it would take some doing in my head. But in the Power 5 conferences, I've been to 60% of about everywhere, which at 41 years of age is pretty good. You know, I did women's basketball with Nate Bukaty for all those years, covering Bonnie Henriksen and Marion Washington's programs, and we got to go to a lot of neat places there too. But as we talk about the ever-changing landscape of collegiate athletics and conference realignment, thinking about new places to possibly go to someday, that's exciting. But I've been blessed to get to go to most of them already.
And I know before you came back to Lawrence to be the voice of the Jayhawks here at Texas Tech, and I believe your primary focus was men's basketball and baseball, correct?
Yep.
But I assume you got to see Patrick Mahomes play a little football while you're
I
down
did,
there?
yeah. And I did some pregame duties for football, and I was doing a couple of national games a year for football. That's how I kept that muscle flexed in terms of the play-by-play muscle on the football side. But yeah, Patrick was amazing then, and the claim to fame is, you know, in addition to all the amazing stuff he did on the football field, he was also, had he stayed committed to it, an unbelievable pitcher that Tim Tadlock, the Tech baseball coach, would have told you would have been a once-in-a-generational arm talent had he truly committed to baseball. Because he threw a 96-mile-an-hour fastball when he was a high school senior at White House in Texas. He made it be known through his representatives that he was not going to sign if a team drafted him. So he fell all the way to the 37th round, and the Detroit Tigers drafted him there, just took a flyer. Had he let it be known through his handlers that he would have signed, he would have been a first or a second round baseball draft pick coming out of high school. This is a guy who from his knees can throw the ball 60 yards down the field without standing or stepping into it, and had a fastball in 96. But as you may have heard, he fell in love with football. There was one particular game at the end of his first football season at Jerry World in Dallas, where the Cowboys play, where it was Texas Tech versus Baylor. He threw for 500 and some odd yards, experienced what it was like to have a stadium of 80,000 fans on their feet over one throw, one play. And he knew in that moment, there's nothing I'll ever be able to do in baseball that will give me the electricity and the energy and the excitement of what that was. So he honored his commitment for half of one season in baseball. But he was all in on football as the quarterback. So he would go from spring practices to baseball, back and forth. But this is where I'm getting at with the story. I promise it's worth it. He finally gets into one game as a pitcher. And again, you know, he's got all the arm talent in the world, but if you've not been harnessing that talent, practicing every day, working with the pitching coach, it's probably not going to be as great as it could be. And as the story goes, he walked a couple of guys, didn't record an out. They all come in to score. And as you know, being a facts and figures stats guy, if you don't record an out, but you give up earned runs, your ERA, earned run average, is infinity. Yeah. And so to this day, a guy that could go on to be the greatest quarterback in NFL history has the worst ERA in the history of college baseball, and it will not be topped because you can't go higher than infinity. But Patrick, in case he ever watches this, and he's a friend to this day, he's amazing. And had he applied himself to that, he would have been All-American as a pitcher. Tubby Smith told me he could have played for the basketball team. That's the type of athlete he was. Anything he applied himself toward, he was going to be a superstar.
And talk a little bit about that move to Texas Tech, to Lubbock. I mean, you had been in Lawrence for quite a while. You built up the Rock Chalk Sports. And I know you felt like you had to make that move to Tech, do some basketball before you had a chance to come back to KU to do basketball.
I'll never forget it. It was a poignant conversation I had with a guy who's now one of our deputy athletic directors, Jason Booker, who at the time was the director of the Jayhawks Sports Network from IMG, or now Learfield. And he and I had lunch at Jimmy John's on 6th Street. I was like 28, 29 years old. I was the understudy for Bob Davis, which meant whenever he had a conflict for football or whatever, I would fill in. And over the course of 5 or 6 years of doing that, I ended up doing about 14 men's games filling in for him, and was really blessed to get to do that. And yet, whenever he retired, whenever that would be, and nobody knew at the time, could they really just hire the backup?
Right.
Or did they need me to go out and build up my resume, build up my demo tape, all that by having 36 men's games a year somewhere else? And so Jason told me that day, and it was right there with the Kevin Harlan advice and endorsement that he gave me in terms of pumping me up. He said, you know, if it were up to me, you'd be my pick as the next voice of the Jayhawks. But realistically, you probably have to go away in order to come home. And so thus began a couple of years of searching for jobs, and I was offered a job at the College of Charleston. Probably wouldn't have been the right fit. I would not have been top of mind awareness with KU people because I wouldn't have been on the schedule. Was up for a job at Mississippi State and did some things creatively to try to impress the Learfield people with that, which if we have time I could tell you. I'll just tell you. Tom Bowman is the head of talent when it comes to national play-by-play guys and making those decisions for Learfield. And I had not gotten on his radar yet. And I knew of a guy that knew him in Jefferson City, Missouri, where Learfield Studios and headquarters are located. And so I had my guy not stock him, but he knew the schedule that Tom would come to work each day. 8:45, he always pulls in on the dot. I said, here's $20. I want you to go to Walmart and buy a big football, NFL football, get a silver Sharpie, silver paint pen, and I want you to write brianhaney.com on the football. And I want you to show up at 8:45 when he gets out of his car, and then I want you to say, here comes a Hail Mary all the way from Lawrence, Kansas. And then when he catches it, as cheesy as it was, you know, Brian Haney's a real catch, something like that. And brianhaney.com would be on the side of the ball. So he does. And it wasn't some random stranger. The guy that was showing up knew Tom. So Tom's like, oh, hey, Mike, how's it going? And Mike's like, hey. Tom's like, what? Drops his suitcase, throws in the ball, catches it. brianhaney.com. Is that the Kansas guy? What's this about? So he goes in, and immediately, of course you're going to go to the website and listen to my stuff if somebody just threw you a football. He listens to it. He calls me 10 minutes later, and he says, tell you what, you're not going to get the Mississippi State job. You're not from there. You don't sound like you're from there. It wouldn't be a fit. Southern school, I don't have a drawl. It wasn't going to work. He said, but that's the most creative thing anybody's ever done to get my attention. Let's stay in touch. Email me every 3 months. Let's stay on each other's radar. And so I would continue to do creative things to stay in front of him. He said, stay on my radar. So I had somebody do a digital image of one of those like weather system meteorology things with like the green storm rolling through, and then there was my head, and it said, staying on your radar. Send him an email with that. It kept it fun and creative. But what happened to the football, Steve? Well, he takes the brianhaney.com football, he puts it in the break room at Learfield. And so for the next 6 months, whenever one of their board ops running 90 different college broadcasts around the country wanted to get some fresh air and step outside, they grab the brianhaney.com football and they go chuck it around. By the end of that year, every producer director of every network knew exactly who I was. Most of them had gone to the website. It was the best $20 I ever spent. And Tom remains a dear friend to this day and is our leader at Learfield, and I'm so blessed to have now worked for him at Texas Tech and the University of Kansas. But the point is, Mississippi State wasn't the fit, but now he knew of me, and we were talking. And then Texas Tech opened up, and it was through a relationship with their play-by-play guy, Mark Finkner. We bonded over our shared beliefs and faith that he told me before he resigned, hey, I'm going to do this. I want you to have a 10-day head start on anybody else, so get your resume ready. Well, guess where Kansas women's basketball was traveling in 48 hours? Lubbock, Texas. Nice. So I go to Lubbock. I go to the fan shop, I buy a Red Raiders t-shirt, a foam finger, a hat, not because I thought I was going to get the job, but I was going to take these around campus and take pictures at the key spots around campus, put it into a portfolio that had me kind of assuming the part, and then rather than send them a demo tape of my Kansas work, I created a demo tape of what it would sound if I was calling the Texas Tech games. And so the day Mark went in and put his letter of resignation down, I had somebody else delivering a CD. We're up to CDs now. We've gone from sets to CDs with my play-by-play calling Tech games, and then this visual portfolio of me already wearing the scarlet and black. And between that, Bill Self calling Billy Gillespie, Danny Manning calling the head of Learfield Lubbock, I got the job. Wow. And by the grace of God, I got the job, and that was the perfect fit if I truly wanted to ever come back to Kansas. Because why? You're in the Big 12. Yep. You're going to be coming back to Lawrence 2 to 3 times a year for the different sports. You're staying top of mind awareness. But through my work with the Round Ball Classic, which we'll talk about in a second, and doing stuff daily on air in Lawrence at KLWN, even while I was in Lubbock, I stayed relevant. I stayed engaged with the KU fan base. Literally, I was gone for 4 years, but I was on air every day in Lawrence with some previously recorded This Day in KU History type thing to stay plugged in. Had I left for Charleston 2 years earlier, never would have happened.
Wow,
but it was perfect how it all came together.
Yeah, as you mentioned, you talked about the Round Ball Classic. I mean, I know a lot of people obviously are familiar with the work with the Jayhawks, and you talked about Kevin Harlan saying you would be a great ambassador. And yeah, talk about the work you've done with the Round Ball Classic. I mean, very impressive. I think I just saw, $94,000 raised with the latest one, and I think, $23,500 to 4 different families.
Yeah,
I mean, just
pleased.
talk about the inspiration for that.
You know, in a pandemic, that was a pretty good year. In a normal year, you know, we now have a 3-pronged weekend of events where we can raise $170,000. We'll cross $1 million raised by 2023. But it started in humble beginnings back in 2009, and I like to say I was going through a quarter-life crisis. I loved my time here at the J School and loved the path I was on as a sportscaster, as the sports director at KLWN in Lawrence. But realistically, at age 26, 27, I was asking myself some big picture questions like, if I get hit by a truck tomorrow, what would my legacy really be? I'm just the guy that gives you the sports scores, who won the Royals game the night before as you drive to work, and maybe entertains you on your drive home with sports talk. You mentioned Rock Chalk Sports Talk. But really, what's my impact? And I read a book called Roaring Lambs, and it's a book about faith. I won't get preachy on the university show here, but it talks about how God elevates people to positions of influence within the secular realm sometimes, and you can make just as profound of an impact and difference in someone's life by utilizing the God-given platform you've been given and the resources and contacts you have within it. Completely changed my perspective, because I asked myself the question, well, what is my platform? What are my resources? And my resources at the time was a Rolodex a mile deep of all these KU basketball greats and KU football greats that I interviewed daily on KLWN. And my platform was this, local media, radio show and all that to promote it. So our first game was in 2009, and there was a local pastor in town named Paul Gray that came to me. His son-in-law was battling cancer and ultimately would pass away. But he said, we got to do something to raise some money for him. And it was the same time I was reading that book. And so we put together our first game in really humble beginnings of $5 tickets and $1 hot dogs. I think we raised about $16,000 that year. Had about 18 players come back. And Brandon White was the young man's name. He passed away. But because his fight was cancer and his passion was children, he was a youth pastor, we decided to make it about pediatric cancer going forward. And so in the last dozen years since, we've been able to bless 43 different kids. We've raised $800,000. Now we have 50 guys a year come back, including big-time NBA guys. We fly them in. We put them up at the Oriad.
And they probably have it on their calendar now, don't
they?
They
Do. And it's a reason to come back to Lawrence and hang out with their old friends and see Coach Self and all that. And again, in non-pandemic times, we'd raise about $175,000 a weekend with a gala, a golf tournament, and the basketball game. This year we had the Round Bowl Classic for the first time, which was bowling, and that was a big hit. But we've got an amazing army of staff members and volunteers and board members that pour their heart and soul into this each and every year, and I get to play a role in leading them and in recruiting the athletes and promoting it and all that. But it's been the number one passion project of my life. Some of my best friends in the world I've met through this cause, and it's something that, so long as God has breath in my lungs and skip in my step, I will continue to do as long as I'm here at KU. So hopefully we'll do this until one day we start to snuff out cancer and we find a cure for this dreadful disease. But in the meantime, we try to raise money that is life-changingly impactful for the families that are up against it.
No, well said. I know a lot of people look forward to that every year. And yeah, after pandemic, I'm sure it will continue to grow. Another thing you've added to your resume lately, children's author.
Yeah.
And I think you were, like you said, you were out talking about this in Springfield with the Naismith family.
With the Naismith family. Can I show this on camera here?
Yes, show that.
All right, cool. This is Game Maker. And, I appreciate the chance to talk about it. Not trying to sell copies or make money. I just want to tell the story of Dr. Naismith, because I think for future generations it's important that they hear what Naismith, first off, the child was like, because it's a kid's book, but then the man and the motivation behind creating basketball and what it would grow into is maybe different than what folks might realize. But how this came about, before I get into the story itself, is just I had an interview with the last living grandson of Dr. Naismith, Jim Naismith, whose handsome picture is in the back of the book. I know we can't zoom in, but maybe you can on your screens at home. There's Jim Naismith. Look at that handsome guy. And I had just sat down with him right next to the original rules that obviously are at the Bruce and Allen Fieldhouse. And this was 5 days before the pandemic really hit and basketball was wiped off the board. March the 12th, 2020. We'll always remember where we were at the day we heard that NCAA tournament action, March Madness, has been canceled. Not postponed, canceled. Are you kidding me? And I'm driving back from Kansas City. I was sitting right next to Coach Self getting set to tape pregame, KU Oklahoma State, when Sean Lester walks in and says—
Because they were supposed to play that night, right?
They were, that afternoon. And this was the team meal, pregame team meal. And Sean Lester, deputy AD, says, hey, save your breath. I think we're about to get news that they're going to cancel the Big 12. And they cancel the Big 12, and we think, okay, well, that's all right, but surely they're not going to cancel March Madness. I mean, it's a billion-dollar organization. Like, you got to do it. We're we're postseason number one with a bullet. I mean, we got the best center, best point guard, best lockdown defender in America. And I thought never in our wildest dreams would they cancel March Madness, but they did. And so I'm sitting there in my living room, like, what am I going to do for the next 3 months? Because college baseball just got canceled too. Lucratively, from a financial standpoint, I make money per game. So I just lost 35 baseball games, and we thought 9 postseason basketball games. And I'm like, gosh, I got to do something creatively and hopefully to generate some money too. And I just had this amazing conversation with Jim Naismith and learned things about his grandfather that I didn't know, even as the voice of the Jayhawks, who's walking to work every day on Naismith Drive. And so I thought, you know what? It might be kind of fun to put that into a children's book. And there have been several play-by-play guys across the country that have done books usually about their school. But a lot of KU books had already been done, and we wanted a larger scope. So we told the story of this inventive, creative, imaginative kid that grew up working on a farm in Canada and literally would invent games to speed along the workday. You probably did this too when you were a kid, Steve. The book does not prop itself up, by the way. That's one disappointing feature of the book. But, you know, whether I was mowing lawns to earn cash or you know, working as a bag boy at Topeka Country Club, we would do things to speed along the day. And he did the same thing. So he was up in Canada, and they were binding up sheaves of wheat. And he would take the wheat, and he would bind it up, and then he'd throw it as high as he could up in the air. And while it was up in the sky, he would try to bind up the next one and then catch the one falling down. That's one. And then you throw it up, that's two. And how many of these could he do in a certain amount of time? And he challenged his family members, he challenged his friends, and it became this game. And so here was this guy at age 8 that was inventing sports on the farm. And then 20-some years later, when he comes to Springfield, Massachusetts, he ends up inventing basketball. But along the road to that, the story is he always knew he wanted to do something big in his life that would make the world a better place. He always wanted to do something to better the lives of other people. And initially he thought he wanted to be a preacher, but he didn't think he had the gift of gab. And so he came up with phys ed teacher. And went to McGill University up in Canada, took the job at the YMCA, and as you've probably heard, was asked by his boss to come up with something they could do during the bitterly cold, harsh New England winters to keep guys in shape, and that's when he came up with basketball, nailing 2 peach baskets to the balcony rails, about 10 feet tall, and the ball would get stuck in there, and he'd have to put a ladder up and climb the ladder and fetch it out, and that's when he realized we can carve a hole in the bottom of this thing and just poke a broomstick handle through there. And so the book covers all of that. Let me show you the last page of the book. My favorite page. The illustrator, by the way, is way more talented than the author. His name's Rob Peters. He's based out of Topeka. He's not a KU grad, but I think he likes KU. But the line says, as the years went by, the game evolved with exciting new styles of play. Fast breaks, dunks, and dishes, alley-oops, and big swishes are all part of the game today. And along came stars like Wilt and Kareem, Jordan, Magic, and Bird, Kobe, Shaq, and LeBron, Leslie, Steph, and Zion. Thanks to James, are names you've now heard. And he captured all of those. Check that out.
I can see Lynette in there.
Isn't that cool? So I snuck Lynette Woodard into the book because she's one of the quotes on the back of the book, along with Jay Billis and Kevin Harlan, Bill Self, Jim Naismith. But Wilt Chamberlain's in there too. So we have a KU men's player and a KU women's player that we snuck in there. But see Jordan and LeBron and Kobe and Lisa Leslie, and we got men's and women's players for the young male and female readers. But it's been another passion project like Roundball because hey man, I'm not going to get rich off this thing. We make like 8%. But what we do make is the opportunity to tell the story of a guy that did not invent basketball for the financial gain. He did not invent basketball for notoriety. He genuinely wanted to do something big in his life and wanted to give back to kids. And so when I got to be in Springfield a couple of weeks ago for Enshrinement Weekend, and we had a launch of the book, and we gave away 2 cases of books to, guess what? YMCA kids in Springfield. Nice. And Boys and Girls Club kids in Springfield. How fitting is that? His grandson and I both agreed that had Dr. Naismith had been there that weekend, same weekend that Jordan's in town, you got LeBron James in town, Bill Russell too. He wouldn't have been over there with Jordan and Bill Russell and LeBron. He would have been hanging out with the kids because his passion was the kids and inspiring future generations. That's what Jim Naismith, his grandson, is about, and that's what Dr. James Naismith is all about. And so hopefully this book takes that story to another generation, reminding them how basketball came about, and inspires the young reader that you too, if you dream big dreams, if you set your mind to it, you too could grow up to change the world, just like Dr. Naismith did. So that's Game Maker.
And before we close, late night, a couple weeks away.
Yeah.
So what is the outlook for the Jayhawks in basketball?
Man, I'm so fired up. I was just talking to the...
First of all, do you have your Run DMC cassette? Have you found that yet from 1986?
I was more of a MC Hammer, Vanilla Ice guy. We could use some Ice Ice Baby. But I know you were listening to Tricky and Walk This Way when I walked in. In fact, that's how you told me to get in here. You said, just walk this way. But no, I was just talking to the Duke guys before I came on with you because we're previewing football. And of course, they wanted to talk basketball. And I said, it's not Bill Self's most talented starting 5, but 1 through 13, in terms of the depth on this team, 6 through 13, if you lined up the players and the bench, players 6 through 13, might be as loaded as he's ever had. I honestly, as we sit here today, don't know how he's going to get minutes and keep the mouths fed on some of these guys. And there'll be some that'll probably have to redshirt because he's just got so many talented players. When Ochai came back and you add in Remy Martin and all these freshmen that are coming in, I mean, it's just a locked and loaded roster. But if there's any guy in the country that I would entrust to figure it all out on how to keep guys happy, how to get the pieces to fit, how to make it all work, we got him right here. We got the best coach in America. So I can't wait to see what it looks like. And it's as deep and talented as we've seen 6 through 13 of probably any Bill Self team he's had.
All right. Well, again, Brian, I appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Thank
I always
you.
like to little close with a little. It's great to have somebody in the studio where I don't have to do the digital toast. But
what
again,
are you drinking in yours?
It's just straight water from the J Bar. No, but again, cheers to your careers. It's been fun to follow you for the past 20-some years. And yeah, like I said, I remember you when you were a student, and great work.
Thank you, Steve. You've been a huge encourager of mine over the years. Your support and encouragement means the world. This is for you and your daughter and your family. And cheers to you, my man.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Brian.
you so much.